All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a text that has shaped history for over 2,000 years. But we're not just looking at it as a religious document. The source material we're examining frames the New Testament as something else entirely. A guide, you could say, for getting through the challenges of modern life. So let's get into it.
This is a question I think a lot of us are asking ourselves these days. We're living in a world that just feels so chaotic, so fast, often filled with a ton of anxiety and just uncertainty. When it's this easy to feel lost, where do you even begin to look for a reliable sense of direction?
Well, the source we're digging into today points to one possible answer, and it's found in this ancient collection of writings, the New Testament. The argument it makes is that this text offers more than just spiritual doctrine. It's actually a practical education in what it means to be human.
Okay, so before we can see how any of this is relevant today, we've got to start with the absolute basics. What is the New Testament really? And what's the fundamental message our source pulls from its core?
So fundamentally, the New Testament is a collection of writings, all from the first century. They're all about the life and purpose of one single figure, Jesus Christ. From his ministry and his teachings, all the way to his death and resurrection. The events that became the very bedrock of Christianity.
But our source says that if you look beyond that specific story, there's a kind of universal education here for every single one of us. It really boils down to four key pillars. Love, and not just for your friends, but for everyone. Radical forgiveness, even for your enemies. Humility in everything you do. And a really deep commitment to justice. So, let's bring this down from the big, abstract picture to something more personal. How could these ancient ideas possibly apply to our own internal worlds? Well, according to the source, they actually outline a pretty direct path toward finding some inner peace, even in our crazy, turbulent times.
Our source lays out this three-step process for what it calls self-purification. Step one is all about connection, reaching out to a higher power, whether that's through prayer or meditation. Step two is about cleansing, actively practicing forgiveness and humility to let go of all that internal junk we carry around. And the final step, which kind of flows from the first two, is achieving this state of spiritual peace that's rooted in faith. And maybe one of the most direct teachings for our anxious minds is right here, in this quote from the book of Matthew. "Do not worry about tomorrow." It sounds so incredibly simple, doesn't it? But for most of us, that is a huge, profound challenge.
And here's where it connects to right now. The source presents this teaching as a direct antidote to the constant pressure and stress of our lives today. It's really a call to plant ourselves firmly in the present moment, instead of letting ourselves get eaten alive by anxiety about what might happen next.
Okay, so that's the personal journey. But the source argues these teachings aren't just meant for individuals. They're actually presented as a kind of blueprint for society. So how do these virtues scale up? From our inner lives to the world that we all have to share.
Right here, the source gives us a really stark choice of values. On one side, it points out the forces that can tear society to shreds, things like hatred, greed, selfishness, and violence. And then on the other side, it offers a direct counterproposal: love, charity, forgiveness, and a powerful commitment to our shared humanity.
Now, at the very heart of this whole social blueprint is maybe the most famous directive of all. It's a deceptively simple but unbelievably demanding principle. Think about it. It doesn't say like your neighbor or even tolerate your neighbor. It says love them with the exact same care and concern you have for yourself. That's a high bar.
And look, this isn't just presented as some nice, feel-good idea. Our source positions this command as the literal foundation for a healthy, functioning society. It's the key, it argues, to building any kind of lasting peace, social harmony, and real tolerance between different people.
So this all leads us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. Why does any of this matter right now, today? The source makes a really direct case for the text's relevance to the biggest problems we're facing in the modern world.
So let's just break down how the source connects these dots. When it comes to things like moral decay and division, the guidance is forgiveness and love. For social injustice, the call is to actively stand with those who are oppressed. In response to a leadership crisis, it offers this fascinating model it calls servant leadership. And for religious intolerance, it proposes a simple but pretty radical idea. Let's zoom in on that leadership model, because it's pretty interesting.
The source calls it servant leadership, and it basically flips the whole traditional idea of power right on its head. The idea is that a leader's main job isn't to be served, but to serve, to put the well-being of their entire community first, above everything else.
And as for that final challenge we mentioned, religious intolerance, the source argues that the answer boils down to this single, powerful number. 1, as in one single, unified humanity. The message our source is highlighting here is that all our religious differences, our national differences, they should ultimately take a back seat to a much more fundamental truth, that we are all part of one human family. The goal here is unity over division. Simple as that.
So, to wrap it all up, the perspective from our source is this. The New Testament can be seen as way more than just a historical artifact or a book only for Christians. It's presented as a living, breathing guide packed with lessons on humanity and justice that could serve as a kind of timeless compass for the crises we're all facing today.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We've talked about love, forgiveness, servant leadership, unity. If you could magically get everyone on Earth to instantly adopt just one of those teachings, which one do you think would change the world the most? It's a pretty fascinating question to think about. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.